friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to our Undertaker The Last Ride review series. Episode, what is this, 4?
4.
What was the name?
Battle Within, I think.
The Battle Within Me.
Or the Battle Inside, something like that.
Battle Inside, the River Stygian. I'll be honest with you, man. This is like my favorite episode of them all.
Yeah, I think same here.
This was really good because it covered so much and it didn't meander at all. It covered a pretty large swath of time, but it started with what I thought was the most interesting historical content we have in The Undertaker, and that's his outtakes from various filmed vignettes that he's done over the years. And, you know, you get people like Pritchard saying, you know, who evidently produced a lot of his early vignettes, probably a lot of them over the years.
Yeah.
Saying, you know, he was always so professional, so disciplined, and everybody that was interviewed, they talk a lot about how he was, he lived the character for, you know, the entire time that he was The Undertaker up until very recently. And that's when they were able to dovetail in talking about why he did Starcast, because it was finally time to let go of that and start making money off of who the real person was.
Off his legacy.
But I thought that the vignettes, the outtakes, were really interesting, and they didn't even show that many of them, but like little bits, like, you know, he'll do a take and then they'll cut and then he'll say, all right, that was good, let's do it again.
Well, one, he said, all right, 30 seconds, we'll go again.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Almost like he was directing the scene himself.
Right.
There was that, but it was interesting juxtaposition where he was talking about, and other people were talking about, his dedication to his character and not ever dropping it when he was in public. And you juxtapose that level of discipline, if you will, to some more lighthearted moments during these takes of these vignettes.
Yeah.
Where he was cracking jokes, there was laughter. Yeah, but at one point he talked about where, you know, whenever they did these vignettes in cemeteries or whatnot, the weather was seemingly always bad, so you had to deal with that. And then, you know, Pritchard said something along the lines of, you know, most of the time there's not another wrestler I'd ask to do some of this stuff other than him, because I know that Undertaker's dedicated to it, dedicated to telling the story, dedicated to his character. So even if it's a crap setup that's going to take 5 hours to get one shot or something like that, which I don't know if WWE even does that, or is it all day type shoot, overnight, bad weather, he'll do it.
Yeah, while they were talking about this stuff, because like I said, the first chunk was about him staying in character, and he had a lot to say about that, how for, you know, years and years and years, whenever he'd leave, he'd go out in black. When he was at the airport, nobody would bug him because they didn't know what he was going to do, how he'd react. There was a great line. It was so appropriate, and it said so much about Vince McMahon, but Vince McMahon's lone quote in this was, he had so much discipline, so much control. And you can see the glint in his eyes when he says the word control. He envied, or he admired, The Undertaker for the one thing that we know and have always heard Vince McMahon takes most seriously, and that's people who can control themselves.
Yes.
I thought that was so appropriate.
That was interesting. I mean, there was a lot of fly on the wall, off the cuff interaction between Undertaker and Vince, and we'd seen in any of the other episodes, them joking with each other.
Dude,
that bit where Taker shows up WrestleMania 35. I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit. He's not on the card, but he goes anyways. And then in the lead up to Mania, he's asked, "Hey, can you be on Raw? Can you actually be on camera on Raw?" And he says, "Well, I didn't bring my gear." And so we had to fly home to Austin, grab his gear, fly back to New York for WrestleMania to be there in time for Mania itself and Raw. And so a gorilla position day of Mania, Vince is giving him some crap about that. It's like, who doesn't bring their gear? A pro brings their gear. And then Undertaker says, well, a pro books me on the card.
Yeah.
And there's some back and forth. And then Vince has a joke about Giant Gonzalez, like his son or something's a wrestler now.
Yeah.
We could have put you in a match against him.
Yeah. That we see a lot of Vince acting like such a happy little brother to the Undertaker, which is funny because Vince is like older than the Undertaker. But like, I forget, I don't know if it was Extreme Rules or what, but Undertaker's backstage and this is the most chill Undertaker we've seen out of all these episodes. These bits are so that they're really just a guy who he comes off as so human. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's goofy in some moments when he's sitting there and Vince comes up behind him and Undertaker says, who's coming up behind me? And Vince like razzes him a little bit. They're like children together. Mm-hmm. It's honestly like the cutest and weirdest thing I've ever seen is that they're like giddy around each other.
Yeah, seemingly.
And to see that juxtaposed with Undertaker not wanting to disappoint Vince, not wanting to let Vince down, and coming across as, I don't want to say a loyal servant because that really does him a disservice, but somebody who really, I don't know, Mark Calloway just came off as very much a human being, like not standoffish at all. I mean, he's talking to everybody. He's giggling. He's laughing. He did a Marlon Brando impression at one point.
Yeah, he kind of makes a self-deprecating comparison to The Godfather because he's sitting there waiting to meet with Vince and everybody's coming up and saying hi, shaking his hand, talking to him for a little bit. And he was like, yeah, it's nice, I guess, sitting here and people come up and show their respect, talk to me. And like The Godfather, he does his impression. Then he kind of rolls his eyes a little bit.
He comes
poking fun at himself.
He's so like lovingly corny in a lot of this, you know.
He's very much like very much like a grandfather.
He is. He totally is. And then to see him when he was at Mania when he wasn't booked, so he's like, I didn't have anything to do, so he went to Access. I'd never been to Access before, besides being there for a signing, and like it's before the crowds are there or whatever, and so him and Michelle and their kid, who's like probably 9 or 10.
Said she
maybe. Was she like 7 or so? 7, 8, 9?
I thought they said she was 6.
Was she 6?
I could be wrong though.
Anyways, she's like running around and they're doing all the nerdy family stuff. Like they're doing the commentate on a match thing.
Yeah.
And then like she's posing with the belt. She's coming out to Bailey's music for the entrance stuff. They're doing all the family stuff. And it's so interesting to see that side of them, which, up until now it's been a lot of, and there was plenty of like serious career talk. But this was the first time where it's like, well, he's just a guy who doesn't have anything better to do. And it's like, we've all been in professionally in situations where we're like, I don't really have a lot to do right now, so I'm just going to hang out. Mm-hmm. And he's almost a little bit on the awkward side. There were moments where he just comes off as a bit awkward, which is so weird.
It is, because he says later on, like, pro wrestling is the one thing that he seemingly has complete and utter confidence in himself in. Mm-hmm, so he talks about, sometimes he's in a situation where as a husband, he doesn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. As a father, he doesn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Seemingly when he's not wrestling, there's situations where he doesn't know what to do or how to conduct himself per se. But he says when he's in the wrestling ring, he's got complete confidence in his abilities and it's something that he knows inside and out. So he feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And it goes a long way to explain why he's probably having such a hard time walking away. And part of it, and I thought Shawn Michaels was fantastic in this episode.
Yeah.
Talking about, it's you have to, he compares his career, I guess, and I guess by extension Undertaker's, as a portrait. And you paint your portrait. And then you have to find a point where you're comfortable stepping back, looking at it, and realizing this is it. Mm-hmm. This is what I've done. You can go and sign your name at the bottom and you can step away.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a situation where the Undertaker feels like he hasn't had that moment yet, but yet when referencing Shawn Michaels' retirement match, because he said he and Shawn have had some conversations about retiring, and as he said that I've told Shawn a couple times, I wish I'd stepped away when you did.
And you got the answer to your question because you've been wondering about that on this review series. I wonder if he ever thought End of an Era could have been it. Well, evidently he thought that maybe even 26 could have been it. Mm-hmm. And then I guess he says he was the one who pitched to Triple H, hey, let's continue this story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was the most fascinating line because it's like, okay, so this has been on his mind for a little while now, mm-hmm. Which is super fascinating.
Let's talk about the Starcast thing. So it's brought up, and they, as you mentioned, they used, his dedication to his character throughout his career as his motivation ultimately to, seek out some sort of social media branding company so he can get endorsements, do more signings, start capitalizing on his legacy. And that led to what he thought was just an autograph signing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
He said he was completely unaware that it was associated or going on at the same time as Double or Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gets a call from Vince, and Vince is all, well, what are you doing? Undertaker says, I'm just doing an autograph signing in Vegas. And I guess Vince fills him in. No, this is our competition, so on and so forth. And Undertaker says, well, we were on bad terms for a while because Vince had his point of view and I had my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it said it wasn't until we could both kind of settle down and open up and discuss our relative point of views that we were able to work things out. Now, I don't know if that was before or after the fact, or before or after Undertaker was withdrew himself from Starcast along with Kurt Angle. I don't know when that happened because that was all pretty quick. The announcement, and like a matter of a week or two later, he was pulled.
I got the impression from that, and I don't know. I got the impression from that. I just watched it the one time that he signed he signed up with this agency to procure that stuff because he talked about they helped me do social media endorsements. They arranged Starcast. Vince, it seems like Vince's deal with the Undertaker was at the time, allowed him to veto appearances from the Undertaker, and Vince pulled the plug on Starcast. And that's where the falling out was. And that might have led, because then we had heard elsewhere, I think, I don't know who had it, that Undertaker signed subsequently to that a 15-year deal with the WWE, which might have then, because we had read that his fee was like $25,000 an hour with a minimum 3 hour.
3 hours, yeah.
Right. And so it seems like he was pulled from Starcast. They had a falling out. And then I can just surmise that maybe at that point he was like, okay, well, I need to make up this revenue, Vince. And Vince is like, fine, for 15 years, I will pay you what you believe you have lost by me being able to pull you. But we have you, and we're going to do the documentary where you talk about, your character. You'll do all that stuff that you want to trade on now through us exclusively.
So WWE can profit from it.
That's my... Well, they can recoup the money they're spending on the Undertaker. That's my read on the situation. I could have that completely off, but that
I don't think that's a bad take.
Because Taker seems like the kind of person who, when he commits to something, like backing out of it is probably out of the question.
It's a pretty massive deal. I feel like, if you're in the back out of it, and the culmination of that bit. It's a relatively, it's like 2 minutes of the whole thing, of a 49-minute. Documentary. It's 2 or 3 minutes talking about Starcast and all that.
Yeah.
And the end of which he's like, yeah, we went and talked it out, and after that everything was fine. I'm paraphrasing. He makes an expression.
Yeah.
He kind of does this.
Yeah. That must have been a heavy 48 hours or whatever it was, you know.
Whatever that time was, because it seemed like, I don't know, whatever issues, at least within himself, might not be 100% resolved,
Yeah. So then he talks about the Goldberg match.
Yes.
We get to that.
So they kind of go over the stuff about the previous Saudi show where it was Brothers of Destruction versus DX. What a nightmare that match was. And then the opportunity is presented to him to have the match against Goldberg the summer after WrestleMania.
Yeah, because he has the Raw bit with Elias, and that goes really well. And he's all riding pretty high. And he's like, okay, well, Goldberg gets pitched to me. And then you get to see sort of the inner fan of Undertaker understanding this is a dream match. This is a big deal. This is something that you don't get very often. You can't get very often. And
they've never had a match before, yeah.
Yeah, and the name Goldberg versus the name Undertaker, it's a big deal. And so he wanted to see it through. Yeah. And I was actually, I'm not going to say I was surprised. Because I don't think Goldberg is the kind of... I think that Undertaker is like close enough to Kane, Triple H, and HBK so they can all collectively talk shit about their match. They didn't talk shit about each other. They jokingly all refer to it as a train wreck, right? I am kind of surprised that I'm not surprised. he did not run down Goldberg at all. At all. At all. He said Goldberg got hurt, and the match was, and then I almost got killed, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But they danced around the Goldberg thing completely. And I was begging. I was sitting there like, oh, get a camera backstage for that. I will guarantee you, I will bet all the money in my wallet, which is like $3, that they had cameras back there and there's footage, and we will never see it.
Probably not.
Because, and he even mentioned, he says, the look on my face after that match, disappointment. He used another word.
He said he talked about Goldberg, said he was disappointed too. And while, I mean, both Undertaker and Michelle McCool were very diplomatic, I kind of feel like Michelle was slightly less so.
Yeah, there might be some more dialogue on the cutting room floor that didn't
talking about texting their doctor as soon as that really awkward, awful spear was hit, asking if he's going to be okay. And she said normally after a show, when she's not there and she's worried about him, she'll text him and say, are you fine? And normally he goes, yeah. And then the fact that he responded, my back is killing me, made her worried.
Yeah.
And they both say, I think Michelle said it was a matter of a couple centimeters or inches, or maybe it was Undertaker, from being potentially really hurt.
Yeah. 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 So they didn't, and again, I will guarantee you there is more to that story that they are letting on, but out of respect to Goldberg, they weren't going to run the guy down.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been, honestly, it probably would have been tacky, and it would have been uncomfortable to hear that. But
it wouldn't have been consistent with with what they've set out so far.
Right. And on top of that, I mean, yeah, I don't know how you get out of the situation in the first place. I mean, I know Goldberg bashed his head. Did he bash his head into the door coming out to that match?
He did, as is customary, and that's what initially busted him open, I believe. But when he took the post spot, is when he got concussed.
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, because he just went head first right into it.
Yeah.
And that's when he rung his bell. I don't know if he's concussed. I don't know if that's ever 100% confirmed. That's what Undertaker said. It's like, I assume he concussed himself. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
The way he was moving around looked like he had concussed himself.
Yeah.
And I guess, they have a match laid out. They want to try to see it out as best they can. They're professionals. But at a certain point,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you do. I mean, you got two guys who their moveset relies on a lot of coordination and
having
strength.
Your legs under you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if Goldberg did not have his legs under him because he was concussed, there's no way he was getting him up for a jackhammer. No way.
Yeah, totally.
But I guess one thing that was interesting from this is that Undertaker said he was already signed up for the Extreme Rules match going into the Goldberg bout at Super Showdown, which I was kind of wondering, we've seen this pattern throughout this thing where he has a bad match. He feels like he needs redemption. So he's not going out on a low. He wants to go out on a high. And so I assume that was, the latest bit of that cycle is he had bad match against Goldberg. He's like, well, I can't go out that way. Give me something else. Well, apparently that was already in place. They go over the match, Extreme Rules, a tag match, where it's him and Roman against Drew McIntyre, Shane McMahon. It's a really fun match. And you could tell he does have a pep in his step. He is out there acting like he has something to prove.
Yeah.
Whether he thought that consciously, he didn't mention that in this episode, but it seemed like he was out there. I need to prove that I still have it.
Right.
And he felt good enough about it that right afterwards he went up to Vince and said, I'm done.
Yeah, that was going to be the last one. Yeah, that was going to be the last one. And I loved how they ended this episode.
Yeah, it was really good.
Number one, you get that scene at Gorilla where he said, I didn't just want to spring this on you, but I guess here I am just springing it on you. And Vince says, well, wherever you go, you lead and I will follow.
Vince puts up a little bit of a fight at first.
He says, we'll talk about it later.
And Undertaker's like, no, I mean, I'll step back to think about it some more, but I feel like that's it. And eventually after, 2 or 3 bits of back and forth, Vince is like, all right, Mark, wherever you lead, I'll go.
Yeah.
And then he's backstage talking about how good he felt about the match. He says, well, I kind of felt too good because now the thoughts to my head, I maybe got 1 or 2 of these more left in me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it ends on the shot of him and AJ talking. backstage. He turns to the cameraman. He's like, "Hey, give us a few minutes."
Yeah, and he just has this giddy smile on his face. And then the preview for next week, they're just heaping all sorts of praise on AJ Styles. And I mean, they're two guys who, they're both from the South. They both seem like they probably have some of the same sensibilities. And obviously, AJ is like a elite level wrestler. And it's like, man, this is the perfect guy to go out on. And obviously, we got that with the Boneyard match, which they're going to discuss in the next episode. But I will almost guarantee that there will be one final in-ring match in front of 70,000 people, probably at next year's WrestleMania. That would not shock me in the least, and that's when we'll get the final episode of The Last Ride.
Yep. And I wonder, too, I'd assume this would be the case, that his match against AJ at Mania, if it were to happen in front of fans, was going to be it.
Oh, probably, definitely. I would imagine so, and it's going to be very interesting to him, to hear him say, talk about how the pandemic has affected this. They're going to have us do this thing. It's going to be interesting to see if he lets on. I mean, dude, they could easily go into some really weird territory where he actually says, this is a placeholder match for, to lead up to WrestleMania, and then reference that shit on SmackDown with AJ Styles, and then he'll start geeking up for, in character, talking about, I got Mania match against Undertaker, and then start the story, this far out. I mean, I would imagine by next April we'll have fans somewhere, so we'll see how that works out. Yeah. But yeah. Anyways, I thought this was a super solid episode. You guys,
it was real solid.
Cool. So yeah, we'll be here next week for the final episode of the second to last episode of The Last Rider until they make the last one.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.